What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, we're diving into a mock draft, a Dynasty mock draft. We're looking at 3 rounds here on YouTube, 12 rounds overall on the podcast as well. And we're going to do it with the 2024 class included. So we did kind of a mock draft with all kinds of different fantasy managers around there, some analysts, and just some fantasy football nuts. That's because that's what we are. We're lunatics. We're already drafting the 2024 class, and we're going to walk you guys through these rounds. So let's get it started. First round, what we have Josh Allen at the 101, Patrick Mahomes 102, Jalen Hurts 103, Burrow 104, CJ Stroud 105, Lamar Jackson sneaking in there at 106, and then first 24 class guy, we have 107 Caleb Williams, and then 108 Justin Herbert. So first 8 picks in Superflex. So this is a Superflex tied in premium concept for mock drafts. And just so you know your league type, are all quarterbacks. What do you think about that, Jeff? Are you comfortable with Caleb Williams going at 107? What is your takeaway on the quarterbacks?
I'm okay with Caleb at 107, probably. I mean, relative, the only guy, I think that, I don't know, I probably would still take Herbert over him, but I understand the excitement and kind of placing that chip on Caleb there. The one I find interesting is Joe Burrow and CJ Stroud at the 104 and the 105, because CJ Stroud is 5 years younger than Joe Burrow, and CJ Stroud is scoring pretty much at the same level that Joe Burrow would. And so, and now with T. Higgins being up in the air, what the future there is going to be, that feels like one that is going to be flipped very, very soon. I think people are going to kind of, they're defaulting right now to thinking that Burrow should be that fourth and kind of not ready for CJ Stroud to jump up there.
My main takeaway is this feels like a Herbert fade. You guys know how I feel about Caleb Williams by now, and for you guys listening or watching, if you don't, Caleb Williams is in my top 7 when he hits the NFL. So he will be my QB7 when he hits the NFL, and that might go up before that. However, Justin Herbert's still in my top 5. I mean, I think obviously there are some concerns. Justin Herbert gets sacked a ton. There are injury concerns now with Justin Herbert. He's been hurt a lot. And there's uncertainty with the coach, but I think that presents an opportunity because we haven't really seen the best of Justin Herbert yet. And what we expect is that an offensive-minded head coach is going there. I think Justin Herbert has massive fantasy football potential. I understand being a little bit concerned about the injuries and things like that, but I would even take Justin Herbert before Caleb Williams. However, I'm comfortable with Caleb Williams going at the 107. I would just bump Herbert up a little bit higher, personally.
There is absolutely no way I'm taking Lamar Jackson over Justin Herbert. Probably. Nope. Like there to me, I like Lamar, and I don't want, listen, Lamar truthers out there, please don't come after me in the comments, because I know there's a lot of you out there. But when you look at him, like, yeah, he's QB5 in points per game, but he's put up some clunkers this year. Like when we're thinking of that, he's had 4 games outside top 20 in QBs. And that's something to note. Like, I think this offense is clicking, but I think his rushing upside, they've talked about him dialing back his rushing a little bit. Now, the last 2 games, they've kind of put it on there, and you've seen him have 2 top 10 finishes. But they've talked about him not wanting to run the football. He does not run at full speed anymore. I think Mina Kimes talked about that as well. Like, it seems like he's keeping himself healthy, which is okay. But I just struggle with him from a dynasty value standpoint. I don't think I take Lamar over Caleb Williams. And I think it's close. It's a competition right there. But Herbert should be over there. Lamar, I think, is the one outlier in this that he should not be there. I think that, when you're looking at it, he should be at 108, in my opinion, if you're going to take them. I can make the argument Anthony Richardson should go before Lamar Jackson, to be honest with you, if you're looking at that. And he's going at 110. We haven't got there yet. But for those first 8, like, I think that there's some guys that I would be definitely taking ahead of Lamar in that crew, because you take Lamar early, I mean, that's your QB1, because the tiers are weird. Once these quarterbacks go off the board, you're looking at a pretty low QB2 with Lamar. How comfortable are you thinking Lamar can really finish in the top 5 week in, week out and help your dynasty team?
I do have Richardson ranked above Lamar Jackson in my rankings, and I think to me, Richardson feels like out of sight, out of mind when I look at him being at the 110. I don't expect him to go there. I think that as we move out of, I think when you're in early drafts, early startups, early mocks, that current season that you're in heavily influences once you kind of get a month clear of that, like things kind of clear out and reset, and you kind of look at it a little bit more a level ground and like kind of optimistic projections on most everybody that you're going to draft. And so under that circumstance, I think Anthony Richardson is pushing to like the 106-ish area.
Yeah. Can I give you, I think I'd also take Tua Tagovailoa over Lamar Jackson. And I know that he's been up and down. There's some contract situations going on there. And we don't know if he's going to be back, but I think as long as Mike McDaniel is there, I think Tua has massive upside to throw for a ton of yards. I think it's going to be a high volume offense. So when we get to Tua, it'll be a little while. Just know that I think I'm more comfortable with him inside that top 7 than I am Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. Jeff, real quick. Jalen Hurts at the 103. If they get rid of the tush push, are you worried about his upside in fantasy where you'd probably take Stroud ahead of him next year at this time?
I have Stroud ranked above Jalen Hurts
already
in my rankings.
Okay.
So.
Shocker. Ohio State fan has CJ Stroud ranked, but I actually don't think that's a hot take. I think that in this format, if they get rid of that, Hurts has been struggling this year. I don't think 103 is like a lock-in for Hurts as we move forward.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely that he's very much struggling this year. And with Shane Steichen out of that offense, what is that offense going to look like? They clearly don't have it right. And I think CJ Stroud shows he doesn't have the rushing upside for sure, but at the same time, I think that flushes out in durability upside. I know CJ Stroud's hurt right now, so everybody will say, well, he's not that durable, and concussion's kind of a freak thing. But
I think that was going to be my counterpoint for the Hurts erasure here. I think he's been playing hurt this year too. He just is not. He's not moving the same way that he did last year, and we kind of knew that he had that shoulder injury and things like that. So I think as he gets healthier next year, and this offense hopefully evolves. This offense is not in a good state right now, and I think they kind of are hoping that they get a new offensive coordinator. I think Philadelphia fans for sure are hoping they get a new offensive coordinator. And I think that it could use a little bit more juice on offense. So yeah, but I'm still pretty comfortable with Hurts from a fantasy football perspective.
But isn't that kind of conversation on like how much you want to use him in that tush push situation because of the shots that he's going to take in there? And it's one of those things that as the Bills are trying to avoid Josh Allen being the next Cam Newton, do you really want 1,000 pounds of man landing on Jalen Hurts 5 times a game and shoving against him very hard and over a course of a season? I don't know. I think that there's a real risk reward on that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a conversation that we're going to have to talk about as we get into it and see how Jalen Hurts finishes the season too. If he takes a shot and, when you're looking at if he continues to struggle, I can see CJ Stroud definitely going ahead of him in dynasty drafts. But before we move on to the rest of the picks here for the first 3 rounds, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Comment below with any questions, trades, or thoughts on the topic.
Also, make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a premium subscriber. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty content, IDP, salary cap, and best ball content for less than $70 annually. We have the best Dynasty content in the industry. Head to footballguys.com/plans to join today.
All right, let's roll through here. We're going to go through some more picks here. I figured we'd stop at the next tier of quarterbacks. So 109, Justin Jefferson goes off the board. So first wide receiver, first non-quarterback. Then we have back-to-back. We got Anthony Richardson and Drake May, 111 sitting there. Jamar Chase, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. So the 12 turn gets Jahmyr and Marvin Harrison Jr. That's a lot of fun. I like that little start. CeeDee Lamb goes at 202. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 203. Dak Prescott goes at 204. And then Trevor Lawrence goes at the 205. So we're going to just stick with the quarterbacks. Drake May at 111. So you're taking him. So you think Drake May is going to be essentially QB 9, 10 in that range. Are you okay with that, Christian? Or are you a little concerned with that? Like Dak's still on the board. Lawrence is there. Murray, Tua still on the board.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy to me. And shout out to whoever made the pick. I understand getting really excited about a rookie quarterback coming in. Drake May is getting a lot of QB1 discussion. However, this is where we get overly excited about an incoming class to where I think Drake May, personally in my rankings, he's sitting down at like QB 17 for me right now as he enters the league. Now, that might look low a year from now, because he could be one of those guys that comes in and he performs, but I would not be comfortable taking him in a startup over even a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who has had a nice little run here. People are trashing him for inefficiencies, fumbles, things like that, but he's scoring fantasy football points. I mentioned Tua, which we once again haven't gotten to, Kyler Murray. All of those guys offer a lot more upside than what I think Drake May will as a rookie, at least. And without knowing the situation, which is huge for quarterbacks specifically, it's a very, very risky pick to go Drake May that early. Now, if we got to like the back of this tier or even into the next tier, I could stomach that, but here I'm not about it.
You guys know who quarterback 4 in point per game is for 2023?
Trevor Lawrence?
No.
That's a guess.
Brock Purdy.
You know what? I think it's kind of worth having the conversation about Brock Purdy potentially being even first round startup pick, to be honest with you. If he's going to be quarterback 4 and you're looking at the infrastructure that's going to be there, the age of him, I don't know. I think obviously given this, people aren't ready for that. 211. I would be doing backflips if I took Mahomes and Brock Purdy I think to start off a draft, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think there is a discussion with Purdy there. But just going back to so this little area, when you think of like going through these picks, looking at them here, to your point about Drake May, if you go Drake May that early, your build better be kind of productive struggle first year.
Yeah.
Like you better go for that productive struggle. Okay, I'm going to load up on picks. I don't necessarily think this guy did this in this draft, like with his productive struggle. I worry about his quarterback position. So if you do take May early, productive struggle is the way to go, because then next year you get the next quarterback that you need, or you get a hot top 5 pick and you're ready to go. You don't take running backs, like you just go straight wide receivers and build that way. So that's how I would look at May in this draft if you're going there. But let's talk about that turn real quick. Ja'Marr Chase and Marvin Harrison Jr. That's my favorite turn. I'm not even going to look at the rest of his team. I just like those two picks. Like those two picks are a lot of fun there. Can you build? You're not taking a quarterback, and I'm going to ask Jeff this because he loves his quarterbacks and Superflex startups. But can you build a contender with wide receivers like that, Chase, Marvin Harrison Jr.? You think that's a viable strategy when we're moving forward into this offseason?
I think you can. I think that I've seen a lot of really good teams that have been built that way, that have gone ahead and kind of avoided the quarterback position. Ideally, I think you still want a top 15-ish quarterback to be your quarterback 1, ideally, but you're kind of making that choice. And especially this not being a third round reversal, you're going to wait a long time before you're getting back up on the clock again. But I do think that you can build that way. And like I said, I've seen some strong teams built there. The one thing on that is to do that early right now. It feels like there's so much uncertainty at the quarterback position around the league. I think that you don't know where guys are going to end up. You don't know where valuation is going to land. And I think that that's the type of thing that you feel a lot comfortable doing it in May or June, when you know who's going to be quarterback where, when you feel like you can still get starting quarterbacks later. Now, like Daniel Jones, is Daniel Jones going to be a starting quarterback moving forward? Or you'd be willing to take him there? I know that last year he was moving up into the 4th or 5th round in a lot of different places. It's just kind of one of those things of like, Will Levis, is he going to be your quarterback? Like, what are you going to do there?
Yeah. Are you comfortable, Christian, with wide receiver 3 for Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah. I think that's where he enters the league. I do have him ahead of CeeDee Lamb, but I do think that is very much, that's based on situation too. Like if you pair Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. in Chicago, I actually think with DJ Moore being there, I might be more susceptible to putting CeeDee and maybe wide receiver 4, and then Marv comes in as wide receiver 5 or something like that. But I'm comfortable going Chase and Marv simply for the fact that you're set at wide receiver for a very long time. And those are two assets that they will hold value for a long time. And so going back to this build a little bit, I think you can do it this way and know that you can flip some of these guys that you took early on and kind of create a good quarterback room, even if you pass on the position super early.
Looking forward to next year real quick. So one of the things that I did, I was at the 114 in a Football Guys draft that we did. And so I took CJ Stroud and Bijan Robinson as my 2 picks to start off that draft. And I took it as a productive struggle. I ended up earning, I ended up trading into the 101 and also earning the 102. So I know that we're going to have Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison added to that team. When we were sitting at this point last year, we were all talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. Caleb Williams as going to be that quarterback. And so to take this type of build, to grab those receivers, to kind of have that productive struggle approach, feeling like if you do it right, you're going to get Caleb Williams, who already people are viewing him as a top 7, top 8 Dynasty Superflex asset. Looking next year, I mean, where do you guys know it better than I do, but Quinn Ewers, JJ McCarthy, what's it going to be as that is that quarterback sitting out there that people would be tanking for?
No, you just draft Luther Burden. Just have 3 wide receivers, and that's kind of how you look at it. No, that's tough. I mean, the tough question is 2025 quarterback class is a mess. I don't know if there's a clear-cut guy. You have to hope Drew Aller plays back with Penn State. You think maybe Klubnik can kind of play up there. Shador, if you believe in him. I tell you, the guy, Jalen Milroe from Alabama, is probably the guy to know. Like, he seems like he might be that dude that we're talking about next year. Like, oh my gosh, this is the next wave of quarterbacks, especially if we see some of these guys like Caleb and these other guys pop off there. But to your point, yeah, it's not as clear cut this year. But we weren't talking about Jaden Daniels even being close to top 3 at this time last year, and then he popped up too. So there's always guys that are going to pop up. That's just the nature of it. But I do think that's a good point. All right, let's move on to the next part of this. We got our first running backs taken. So 206, we got A.J. Brown. Then we have Garrett Wilson at 207. Kyler Murray at 208, Tua at 209, CMC at 210, Brock Purdy at 211, who we mentioned a little earlier, and then Bijan Robinson finally off the board at 212. Let's talk about the running backs because we haven't talked about them yet. So we have our first 2 running backs here, CMC and Bijan. Are you taking CMC over Bijan, Christian, or are you taking Bijan as your running back 1, or even taking running backs? What are we doing with the running backs here in these mocks?
That's the thing. So in my head, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like 2nd round pick for a running back. I think I'm okay with that. Kind of anchor it. Don't touch the position for a while. That said, I'm not cool with that with all the receivers that are still on the board. And so if I were to take a running back, I'd still lean Bijan. We obviously know the usage hasn't been good. I think there's some rumblings now that Arthur Smith might lose his job at the end of the year, which I think could be really massive for a guy like Bijan Robinson. That said, I mean, I think you can make arguments for about 5 different running backs as RB1 at this point. And so if that's the case, I'll just wait and get a guy who I think might be close. Right now, I know McCaffrey's having an MVP-like year. I'm still not super comfortable drafting him as RB1 because we do know the position falls off quickly. This is a player who has battled injuries over the years. He's my RB2 technically in my rankings right now, but it's just that's not someone I'm targeting in startup drafts at this point.
Yeah, there's with Justin Fields still on the board, with A.J. Brown, with Jalen Waddle, with Chris Olave sitting there. Given Christian McCaffrey, I really hope we've got 4 more years left of him, but we might have 1 more year left of them, the way that we see running backs kind of just fall off that cliff. Who was waving the white flag on Austin Eckler at this time last year, or who was kind of, Aaron Jones feels like he might be around there, Derrick Henry, obviously, but we're nervous about that. So that is my thought on grabbing Christian McCaffrey this early, that basically you better win now because, it could be ugly quick. Then Bijan Robinson, I mean, it's malpractice to take Bijan Robinson where the Falcons did at the 108 in the draft. It is beyond criminal to use him the way that they are using him in a 3-headed backfield. And so that's where I just don't have any faith at all. If Arthur Smith is the coach of that team, that you're going to get anywhere near the upside that Bijan Robinson presents. It's just, he thinks that he's smarter than the room and he's going to play Tyler Algier for some reason. So I definitely would, especially Chris Olave being there. I like him quite a bit, and Justin Fields to grab that quarterback. I mean, I know Justin Fields might not be the Bears starting quarterback, but he might actually land in a better position by not being the Bears starting quarterback.
Yeah, these guys are just talking crap about my pick because I picked Bijan at 212 in this mock. So I was actually in this one because I was there. But I think there is something to say. Just to, Jeff loves Chris Olave and these guys. But if you're looking at it, I think with people kind of shift at the 101, they shift away from running backs. I just went bully running back because I wanted to try it. I wanted to see how it looked and can I build around those guys. And I got Bijan, and then we haven't talked about, but Jahmyr Gibbs back to back. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to take these guys and just build and try to do old school redraft dynasty kind of build with the running back position. I think that if that was a pick made by me on the fact that Arthur Smith won't be there. Like, all right, Arthur Smith's not going to be there. I'm projecting that he's not going to be there. I'll take that. I think Gibbs has a good role there on the back-to-back picks there. I do want to mention Purdy because Jeff did bring him up. Do we draft Purdy before we draft Tua and Murray? Or we, he went, quarterback 12-ish, 13 in this one. Is that too low, Christian, or is that okay?
I think it's probably too low. And that's making me look at my rankings and say I'm too low on Brock Purdy just from what we've seen this year. Excuse me. I think Jeff made a really good point where if we know that this guy's going to be the starter, we know that Kyle Shanahan's going to be there, and we know that those weapons are going to return next year. What is the argument against Brock Purdy being a top 7 at, maybe 8, 9 floor? He's just producing. Kyle Shanahan's in his bag. In week 15, he had 2 wide open wide receivers to the point that you could not see another defender on the field when the camera panned to those players catching the football. When the play caller is able to do that, that quarterback's going to be extra productive. I know there have been some comps to like Drew Brees lately. I still think that's crazy. I still think that Brock Purdy is a good, maybe not elite quarterback, but maybe he's in the great tier of operating the Shanahan system, and that gives him immense upside. And so I need to move Brock Purdy up in my rankings. That was a long way of saying that.
Before you get into what you're about to say, because I can see your face, so you're just ready to pounce. The way I would look at the 101 to the 108, like all those quarterbacks that we mentioned earlier, if you compare them with Brock Purdy, you do that. Like if you're sitting there at the 108 and you have Justin Herbert, I know Lawrence was sitting there, but I think I might want to take Purdy. Or as soon as he kind of goes there, I actually think pairing like CJ Stroud and Purdy would be nasty. And I cannot believe I'm saying this. Like I can't believe I'm saying Brock Purdy with CJ Stroud would be nasty as a startup, but I think it would be. And I think that if you're starting your dynasty drafts early because you guys are degenerates, you're going to be able to get that value early. But later, I don't think you will, because if Purdy leads this team to the playoffs in terms of the Super Bowl or whatever the case may be, he's going to shoot up those rankings. So if you do it early, I think pairing Purdy, like Purdy and Mahomes right there, that's just nasty.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So I was in a league. I traded, you guys know about this, but I traded Brock Purdy and Drake London, and I got back all the picks for this year, all 4 picks for this year, and then the first 2 picks for next year. It ended up being the 101, so I'm going to be able to get Caleb Williams off of that. But it's still like in the back of my mind, I'm like, did I actually win that deal? Because it's one of those that, and kind of when I was looking at it, tracking to the 101 a month ago or so, I was like, that is a slam dunk win. I can't believe it. And now I'm sitting here like, man, Brock Purdy might be like that dude. And it's, so it is, I do have the belief that we're far enough now into it that if this was all smoke and mirrors and all Shanahan magic, he would have been solved. Brock Purdy would have been figured out, and he would be throwing interceptions. Defenses would be switching him up. Yeah. And I think that the processing's clearly there. The accuracy is clearly there. He has high level command very quickly of what is a complicated offense. He played a lot of college football. I know that last year was really pretty ugly at Iowa State, but where he was before that last year, he was trending towards being a guy that would have been probably a day 2 pick before that kind of fell off there. So I think it's just a lot of preconceived things around him that, and I see the arguments of like, well, if he wasn't in San Francisco, would he still be that good? It doesn't matter. He's in San Francisco. It doesn't matter if like how good he would be if he was in Atlanta, or how good he would be if he's in San Francisco. That's all that matters.
He still definitely has a top 5 punchable face, though. Can we agree on that? Like, if I saw him, like, it'd be hands out there for sure. All right, let's go through the last round here, and then we'll kind of do our narratives of it. Jahmyr Gibbs went 301, Justin Fields 302, Jordan Love at 303. Antonio Brown went at 304. That was a placeholder. So 304 was Malik Neighbors. So that's when we have Malik Neighbors, LSU wide receiver guy we've talked about here on the show. Jalen Waddle went 305. Chris Olave, 306. LaPorta, 307. Tight end 1 LaPorta. Tight end premium. That was the first tight end off the board. Is in the middle of the third. Puka Nacua went 308. Breece Hall, 309. Jaden Daniels went at 310. Jonathan Taylor, 311. And then Brock Bowers, couldn't think of the name right there, at 312. So that's how they rounded out. That last team that we talked about, Marvin Harrison Jr., added Brock Bowers to his team too. So like you're thinking he's building young. I think that's a pretty fun build there. So when you're looking at this, a lot of wide receivers, when you're thinking of guys like, Waddle and Olave, Neighbors ahead of Waddle and Olave to me, though. That's a ballsy pick there, when you're thinking of like where that's ranked. So you're looking at wide receiver wise. I mean, you're basically saying Neighbors can be like a wide receiver 7 as soon as he steps onto the field. Is that early, Christian? Or, are you still taking Waddle, Olave, Puka, those guys ahead of him?
It's early. I don't think, but my rankings are a little different. So, I still have my reservations about what this Rams offense looks like with an actually healthy Cooper Kupp. But I'm not going to get into the Puka Nacua discussion today because we've done that enough on the show. I do think that that's very early. There are a ton of players that I think you can argue should go ahead of Malik Neighbors, and that's me. Malik Neighbors is in a tier of his own behind Marvin Harrison Jr. He is a very, very talented wide receiver that's probably going to go in the top 6 or 7 picks if I had to guess, just because of all the wide receiver needy teams that are sitting at the top of the draft right now. With that said, like his skill set and probably best comp is DJ Moore, who is producing as a fantasy wide receiver 1 this year. And obviously he's a little bit older than what Neighbors will come in as, but yeah, I mean, I am not to the point that I'm comfortable putting Neighbors inside that top 8. He's right now my wide receiver 17. And so there's a big discrepancy there.
The one that stands out to me, Sam LaPorta in the 3rd round. And if I can get Trey McBride in the 5th round, I'll tell you right now, Sam LaPorta is not going to be on any of my teams. If I can get Trey McBride 2 full rounds later, I'm curious where you guys land on that, because you look over the last, I think it's 8 to 10 games now, McBride is just smashing him on volume. And I think when you project forward in that Cardinals offense, McBride is the wide receiver 1 in that offense. And I think that it's Sam LaPorta. Kind of what happened there, Jameson Williams was out of the lineup. They were trying to still figure out kind of the running backs, I think, a little bit. And he had a really hot start, got on people's radars. And then I think it really cooled off, except for right at the right time. He had a massive game against Denver with the 3 touchdowns. And he had one, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago too. And so other than that, you're kind of looking at 4 for 40 ish, I feel like, and when I look at him, whereas McBride, I'm looking at 9 for 90 and like week to week. And so in my mind, that valuation I think is curious to me in Dynasty where people are landing on that.
It's tough with tight ends. I tend to I struggle in tight end premium sometimes to really reach on these guys. I think that I like the 5th round a lot more. Like when I'm looking at in the late 4th in this mock, Hawkinson, Pitts, McBride, Kincaid, Andrews, I'd be much more comfortable drafting those guys where LaPorta went in the 3rd when you have Olave sitting there, Puka. You have some of these other guys that you could maybe grab, Jonathan Taylor if you wanted to. I still think there's more. I think there's going to be value at the tight end position finally. I think Christian talked about it on social media, where this is kind of the golden age of tight ends now. We're getting into that point where we're going to have a lot of good guys. And Brock Bowers going tight end 2. And he is not even in the league yet. And we're talking about him. So yeah, I agree with you. I think you hit that on the head in terms of the tight end position. You might want to just wait, right? You're just looking at the board and how it kind of played out there. I think, the one thing that did stand out to me here when I'm just looking at the board overall, I don't know. I'm going to draft Jalen Waddle every day of my life, I think. I love Jalen Waddle. I mean, I don't get it. I think that I actually saw a hot take out there. Someone, an analyst for another site, so we won't name what site that is. They said Jalen Waddle is a hot take. He's going to fall out of the top 20 wide receivers next year. That's ridiculous because he's talented and he's in Miami's offense. And I think that with Hill maybe even slowing down, Waddle's still going to be there. 305, I think that was a smash pick. I love that pick to pair him with Stroud, Murray, and Waddle when you go on 0-1 running back there. And then he added James Cook in the 7th. That's a really, really good draft I thought that he had. But Waddle to me is just going to be a value. I traded Pittman in a second for Waddle on a win now team. I did it and I went for it. And I still would rather have Waddle because I still think that I could move Waddle if I need to. He went a full round ahead of Pittman. The second probably was a little bit of overpay, but I'm okay with that. I can still use that value. So that's the pick that stood out to me. What about you, Christian?
There are a couple. So Breece Hall, I think is actually a value here. And I just talked about, looking at the running back landscape, it's really tough for me to pull the trigger when all these wide receivers are on the board. But I do think that when the dust settles, Breece Hall is still going to be the lead back in New York in an Aaron Rodgers-led offense. Now, I know it hasn't looked great this year. I think it's pretty easy to hone in on the running game against the Jets right now. just based on their quarterback situation. So I do think that while some of those inefficiencies are concerning, Breece Hall is still one of my top 3 dynasty running backs. The other one I wanted to mention, though, Jordan Love, where he was picked, I'm not quite there, but in looking at how he's produced this year, I understand being there. I guess my question is, are you guys confident that he is going to be the Packers starter past next year? Because he did sign that 2-year kind of weird extension where he was getting less money than if he got tagged, but he had that extra year of certainty. Are you guys confident that he's going to be a dude? Because he's been as inconsistent as anyone.
I'll be honest with you. Every single time I feel like I form an opinion on Jordan Love, he proves it wrong. And it's gone both ways because I was ready to write him off. I was excited about the way he played early in the season, but then I was ready to write him off. And then he bounced back hard from that. And then I said, okay, maybe this is going to be the guy. And the last 2 weeks have been an absolute train wreck. And I don't think it's going to get better against a strong Carolina pass defense this week. So that's where my struggle is. And on that, I understand the youth and the valuation on that. I think but it's to me, you're stepping in. Jaden Daniels, I feel like I'd rather, if I knew Jaden Daniels was going to be a top 10 pick, I'm taking him over Jordan Love all day long.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Sitting there, I don't mind with how he started with Hurts, McCaffrey. I don't mind throwing in Jaden Daniels there, especially with Shroud, what we've seen from there. Richardson, when he was on his way. You're looking at a rushing upside, and you could get a late guy later. You can get Russell Wilson later and just have that bridge quarterback that you're like, hey, QB2, you get the upside there. That's probably how I would play the startup in terms of that. All right, well, last one. So just to kind of wrap these first 3 rounds up, running backs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 running backs in the top 36. When we're thinking of running backs, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but does that seem like basically how Dynasty is going to value running backs now? I've always said those top 5 are really where the value's kind of been at. And those kind of are my top 5. You have, ETN, Devonta Chandler, those guys later that we're going to get to on the rest of the podcast. If you're not listening to the podcast, if you're over on YouTube, but does that feel where we're at with running backs now, Christian? 5 out of the top 36 picks?
I kind of feel like that's too many. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just with the wide receivers that are available all the time, it's really difficult to pull the trigger when it's been, when you look at the top running backs in production this year, sure, McCaffrey's there, but Raheem Mostert right now is RB2. This is before week 16. Raheem Mostert, Travis Etienne's technically RB3, but he's not been great for your fantasy lineup. Rashad White, Kyron Williams. I understand that all of these other guys have names and there's definitely a lot of upside with it. But when that's the list I'm looking at for the most recent sample size of how running backs produce, it's really difficult for me to wrap my head around taking a running back in the first 3 rounds of Dynasty right now.
I think the struggle comes in on how many good young running backs are there, I think is what the conversation really is. And when you look back, back when that class that had Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook and all those guys kind of hit the league at the same time, and you felt like we have a wave of guys coming in here that are going to be dominant backs, because I see a lot about, and we've talked in the past a lot about running back usage, but you look across the league, how many, if teams could have a back that they could use like Christian McCaffrey solely as that back, how many teams in the league do you think would do that? Because I think still a very high percentage of teams would go that direction. So to me, the running back valuation says a lot more about where the young running backs are relative to the young wide receivers in talent are versus the direction that the league is heading in any sort of way. I just don't think we're getting the young guy. Breece Hall's got the injury questions and he's been disappointing this year. If Bijan Robinson were doing what he was capable of doing, he would be a first round pick in this thing probably. And so it's even the exciting ones that you like, the young ones have questions around them. If Jahmyr Gibbs was the only back in Detroit, we've seen some of the games that he's done by himself with David Montgomery out of that lineup. That's guys probably a first round pick too.
Yeah. All right, we're about to head over to the podcast. If you're not listening over on the podcast, make sure you head over there because the full version of every show, and this show specifically, we have a lot more rounds to get through. There are more than 3 rounds in Dynasty Startup. So head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcast. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you head over there, subscribe, leave us a review, 5 stars preferably. But look up the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, and you can find the rest of this mock.